about that.
Hey, let's talk about some live events you guys were running. I was surprised to see when you ran like in Washington, Kennewick, Washington, only 500 fans were there. But one of those fans was Nick Nolte. Nick Nolte came to see TNA wrestling with 499 other people. What in the world?
How about that? Now, Kennewick and what was that run we did out there?
Kennewick, Kent, and then up in Canada,
Canada,
Abbotsford.
yes.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
And then
That was a good run.
Penticton.
Yeah, that was a good run for us. They got to argue with the numbers there, but I think there was substantially more than 5. But it was, and we were selling the crap out of merch.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. Kennewick was 500, Kent was 800, Abbotsford was 1,000. We don't know the numbers for sure, but it says Penticton, if I said that right, is 800 fans. But he would go out of his way to be complimentary, and he said, although the crowds aren't big, those who came were hot every night on the tour and clearly watched the television show and they're into the characters, particularly Beer Money. But based on the merchandise sales, the brand is bigger than any of the stars because TNA logo merchandise and programs were usually the best selling stuff at the shows. That's kind of a surprise to me. I mean, the brand is what's so over. Were you surprised by that, or is that about what you expected?
Well, Don kind of given, because Don did not come from a wrestling background. He, marketing and shop at home and not just baseball cards. I mean, Don sold Beanie Babies and just he's a salesman. You know him, but you knew him, just all that. But hearing him talk and me trying to piece together some wrestling pieces, and then hearing in one ear, whether it's a JArrett voice or a Vince McMahon voice or even a Lawler voice, that it just takes time and you've got to get established, because in our bubble, our world, at this point, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Daniels, Beer Money had come together. Those guys, to our audience, the youth was the youth, but yeah, the younger guys and the day one talent, they were really getting traction. But when you saw the reality of, oh wait, by 7-1, a TNA shirt sold, and Beer Money got hot and sold a lot of shirts and a lot of merch for us, but it was always multiples that the TNA brand would sell. And Don would just say, dude, that is exactly what they're coming to see. They're TNA fans, not necessarily a wrestler fan. And when we did the rebrand, I just wish, oh boy, that's another podcast. Just how the rebrand just completely failed. And look at us right now off the weekend, the TNA event, and good luck to all those guys. They just named a new CFO. Did you see that this morning, Conrad?
I missed that. Hey, you know what? Since you brought it up, let's talk about it. All of a sudden there's some interesting stuff going on over in TNA, and we haven't talked about it here on the program, but it feels like they've got some sort of a partnership or working agreement with WWE. We've seen Jordan Grace and some other folks appearing both ways. I know NXT sent a star over to their pay-per-view this weekend, but at that pay-per-view this weekend, it was a return of not only Matt Hardy, which we got at the last pay-per-view, but now Jeff Hardy's there. So the Hardy boys back together in TNA, along with Dolph Ziggler and Top Dollar and so many others. And now there's even speculation that, hey, since there is some sort of a working agreement with WWE, could that mean that we would see AJ Styles show up? And AJ, when he was asked about it doing media for the PLE this past weekend, was very excited about the idea. And this past weekend, they announced that AJ would actually be working on a Noah show. It's a whole new ballgame in WWE. And the idea that you might see AJ Styles back in TNA is amazing. Who would have ever thought that that was possible, under the WWE banner? What do you make of Jeff's return, Jeff Hardy that is, and the possibility of AJ Styles and others back in TNA? That's got to make you feel good, right?
Oh, it's just, I guess this happens when you've been around 38 years. When I think back to the Attitude Era, when it was just the Yankees or the Red Sox, no other team existed. It was WWF or WCW. Nothing existed, but yeah, ECW was kind of there and all that. And then it's, the TNA days, we had a working relationship the Okada story is obviously a part of that, but we had a relationship with New Japan and AAA, and then a little bit with CML, and then the global force didn't take off, but just kind of that whole vision and AEW and the New Japan and kind of the forbidden door concept, and that's coming up at the end. But it's at the very end of that line, you look at WWE, and now they're working specifically with a Japanese company, another American company. You just kind of look at the world of professional wrestling, and you've got, on the one hand, a presidential candidate being interviewed by the U.S. champion. Now, yeah, he's a YouTuber and a big star and all that, but Conrad, you know, that was gym talk at my gym, completely non-wrestling fans, that one conversation led to another. And you just, Connie, we're all wrestling fans. But when you look at a Trump doing a podcast to the WWE US champion, and you look at AJ Styles going back to a place that he literally started at, that was unheard of a generation ago, just completely unheard of. Matt and Jeff both had, Jeff had, how many times he worked for TNA? 2 or 3 times. Matt, I think 2 or 3 times. Those guys there. Who would ever thought you'd seen Dolph Ziggler or Nick Nemeth in a TNA ring? It's just, the business has radically changed. I mean, the Netflix deal coming on. I mean, it's just the stuff me and you chatted about before we roll tape that we can't talk about. I
mean, so let's talk a little bit about Sting and his retirement. No, I'm not talking about the retirement from 2024. I'm talking about the one you were planning 15 years ago. Meltzer would say they've had these plans every year since he came back. Bound for Glory is being targeted as an idea where they may actually do the retirement. Sting is 50, and every year he says it's his last year, and every year Dixie Carter gives him a good deal and talks him into signing for one more year. There's an internal belief that in the end the same thing will happen this year, but it's noted that the new TV schedule, which means he's doing 4 days all in a row once a month since he doesn't do any house shows or foreign tours, that at north of $500,000 a year, guaranteeing he'll always be on top and probably have time off at least once a year to do an angle. You just can't turn that down. So we know that he didn't retire in 2009. He made it all the way to 2024. But did you think you were going to actually get to do the real deal Sting retirement at any point in TNA?
I never really gave that I never gave it a second thought. And the reason why is that legitimate retirements in wrestling, are just so few and far between. I mean, Jackie Fargo came back and drew money in his 70s. You just coming off the heels of Triple Mania, I'll call it the legends, or I don't even want to call them old timers. I'm inching it, but Dr. Wagner, Cibernetico, obviously Vamp at the very top of that list. But when you kind of look at legendary Negro Cassis right now, and you know who Negro Cassis is?
Yeah, legend.
Okay, I didn't even. This is how I'm not completely dialed in, but Psycho Clown is his son-in-law.
Did not know that.
Yeah, so they're the tag champs, and Negro's 68. So when you kind of take a step back, and you asked about, did I ever think I was going to do the retirement match or tour of Sting? I really didn't, because just how the industry is. Dutch Mantel's quote, "You can't kill a memory," and the wrestling fans just they absolutely love it. The nostalgia, the box office that's going on south of the border right now with AAA is blowing my mind. I mean, they are doing really, really well across the board. I'm not just talking about ticket sales. I'm talking about corporate sponsorship. And that's how I looked at Sting on our roster, that, we talked about Midway. I mean, when you walk into a door with Midway and you say, hey, you got Sting and, and Kurt Angle, and you can almost say in others, and you're like, oh, okay. All right. They've got a hell of a roster. I think about the gigantic box office that AEW did just this year in March. Well, in the wrestling fans' eyes, did they really? Because I know Tanae would occasionally allude to, is this Sting? Because we kind of poked and prodded, but in a lot of ways, Sting retired in 2024, but that quote unquote retirement storyline might have started in '08 or '09. So it's a 15-year storyline, but no, it's I never did, and our schedule fit with Sting, with his personal life, with his family life, and really with his physical, what he wanted to do to give to the business. Because I will say this about Sting, whether it was the Joker or the Icon or whatever version Sting brought to the table, you were going to get 100% of who Steve is, and that's something that I admire greatly to this day.